Welcome back to Good Morning Antigua Barbuda for today, Friday, as we welcome back to Good Morning Ambassador. Good morning Antigua Barbuda. Ambassador, Her Excellency Joan Underwood. How are you?
I am well.
You got caught in traffic, man.
Oh my goodness.
It's crazy out there.
Yeah, half an hour from Potters to here.
At this time of the morning. Because
Yeah.
everybody's hustling and bustling. Plus,
That's
it's a
right.
Friday, too. But today we have you here because we want to speak about the severance pay for the employees of State Insurance Corporation, as well as the new tabled transfer bill. And you are, well, the person who is narrating or navigating this process along with others, but you're the head person. Tell us how satisfied you are of the discussions in Parliament and, of course, the severance.
Okay, well, in terms of the discussions in Parliament, unfortunately, I didn't catch any of the debate yesterday because I was engaged in other meetings. However, on the first day of the debate, I thought we had a very good debate. The Prime Minister's presentation, I think, was quite effective. He was able to successfully convey the decisions of the divestment board, the rationale for the State Insurance Transfer of Assets and Liability Act, and to indicate the government's underlying purpose for making the decision to offer severance to the employees of State Insurance Corporation. And I want to spend some time addressing that issue because indeed it represents an evolution of our position on the issue. Now, you know, we have been working on that divestment project for quite some time now. And one of the structures in the whole divestment unit is the State Insurance Corporation Advisory Committee. And that committee is made up of representation from the board of directors, the senior managers of State Insurance Corporation. Invitations were extended to both unions, because in the case of State Insurance Corporation, middle managers are represented by the Antigua Workers Union, and line staff are represented by the Antigua Trades and Labor Union. So both unions were invited to sit on the advisory committee. The advisory committee also has representation from the Ministry of Legal Affairs, so we can get legal advice, from the Ministry of Finance, so we can have that expert technical analysis to inform our decision making, and a representative from the private sector, which in this case is the president of the Antigua and Barbuda Employees Federation. So when we met with the advisory committee, we asked them, what do you think are the most important issues from the staff perspective as far as the divestment is concerned? And we arrived at consensus that job security was huge, preservation of benefits, and security of their pension fund. So it was based on that consensus position that we designed a transaction where the successful investor would not have the opportunity to sever. As you know, we're living in extremely harsh economic conditions, not just in Antigua and Barbuda, but regionally and internationally. So we thought it prudent to protect jobs. So it was for that reason that we structured the transaction in such a way that no severance would obtain. So you would have to retain all the employees. You couldn't send home anybody. And you may recall that when we first started talking about divestment, there was this fear that people were going to lose jobs. So that was the motivation. In more recent times, the ATNLU has indicated that their members feel very strongly that they want their severance. So the divestment board had an extraordinary meeting a few days ago. We revisited the issue, and the board took a decision. If the workers feel that strongly about it, that they want severance, we will put it on the table for them. However, we have to realize that there's an opportunity cost. You, as the Attorney General keeps correcting us, it's not you can't have your cake and eat it. He says you have to have your cake in order to eat it. It's you can't eat your cake and still have it. So workers will have the opportunity to choose no severance, therefore job security, preservation of benefits, everything intact, or to be severed. Once one is severed, there is no guarantee of a subsequent offer of employment. And even if there is a subsequent offer of employment, there's no guarantee that the terms and conditions will be the same as they were pre-severance. Now, I want to acknowledge the role of the Antigua and Barbuda Workers Union, because once we had determined that we would structure it in such a way that we would protect jobs. They said, but listen, workers may still be concerned that afterwards something may go wrong and there may be the need to sever them. We need to ensure that the money will be there to take care of that obligation. So the workers' union recommended, and the board approved, the establishment of a trust which would hold enough assets to pay any severance liability that might become due. So even though you stay on, you know there's a trust that has your severance money taken care of.
That's a novel arrangement, isn't it?
Well, we do exercise our best efforts to come up with solutions which address the genuine underlying interests of the employees. And we think that with both those options, because if you say you want to be severed, and we say, okay, here you go, you have that option. If you say you want job security, that's on the table as well. And we've also provided for your severance if it needs to be paid out later on.
But the fact that you take the severance does not stop the new company or whoever it is from rehiring you.
They may if they wish. They may offer you and then you may accept or not accept, but there's no guarantee. What we set out to accomplish initially, based on the feedback from our advisory committee, was to get that job security. However, persons have opted to have money in hand as opposed to the job security. Well, we'll see, because it's only when the employees make their decision we'll know for sure.
I read here also in the parliamentary debate that if you take severance and a couple of you wants to go into entrepreneurship, that the government will assist you?
We will facilitate you in terms of providing certain training and so on. The Prime Minister did mention that in the debate. But in addition to that, because some people may not want to be entrepreneurs, they may want to seek employment elsewhere. So it's outplacement services in general, if you need, because most of the workers at State have been there for quite some time. So if you need assistance in terms of your resume writing, your application process, we will endeavor to assist in that regard, yes.
Now, how close are we to a bid? The process of the Parliament bill being tabled, we had to do that before we get to selecting?
Yes, because State Insurance Corporation is a statutory body. As such, it cannot be divested. So the first step is to transform it into a company. And that's what's happening right now. The only thing that will change is that it will transition from a statutory body to a limited liability company with government as the sole shareholder. All the assets and liabilities are being transferred. All the employees are being transferred. As we say, the day before the bill passes will be exactly the same in terms of operations as the day after the bill passes. Nothing, you will not be able to observe any change, either from the employee perspective, the customer perspective, general public perspective. It's rather a legal process to pave the way. It's not divestment. It's a precursor to divestment.
Now, after you've done all that and put all these things in for the current employees at State Insurance, how do you know that the persons who are bidding would want to accept the things, the framework that you're putting in place? You
see, this is why these things have to be ironed out ahead of the bid process, because all these changes affect the pricing, affect the attractiveness of the entity. And it's a bit ironic, because when we had made the determination that we wanted job security, we wanted preservation of jobs, our advisors at the International Finance Corporation said to us, you realize this may affect the price that you can get, because you've tied the investors' hands and said you have to work with all these employees. So that would affect the price in terms of, you know, driving it down a bit. Now that the severance is on the table, it may drive the price back up, depending on how many people opt to take the severance package, because then it gives the investor more freedom in terms of making staffing decisions.
Another issue, like, what about the assets of State Insurance Corporation, or especially the lands that we've heard so much about in Antigua, Barbuda, that State Insurance own? What happens to that?
Let me just preface my answer by saying that here you have absolute proof when the government says that it believes in consultation and it does take on board feedback. You see that that has happened, because the State Insurance Divestment Project, the structure of it has evolved based on feedback that we have received. When we first announced we were going to divest, persons said a number of things. Among them was, we don't want the lands to be divested. And so the board and cabinet looked at it and they said, okay, fine, figure out a way that we can keep the lands and divest the business, the insurance business, because remember, that's what this is about. The government has said, we do not think it's proper for government to be both competitor and regulator. At the same time, our role should focus on the regulatory function. So what we've done in terms of the transaction structure that we've designed, it will be the business of insurance. So all the non-core assets, which include real estate, and the real estate in question is the building currently occupied by the Ministry of Labor. There is a plot of land at the top of St. Mary's Street. It's a parking lot right now. And then there's some land in Lavington. Those 3 pieces of property will not be divested. Those will be retained by the government, and in case of the real estate that is there to be developed, it will be developed subsequently, and Antiguans and Barbudans will have an opportunity to be a part of that. We've actually been brainstorming some things that we can do so to involve contractors and builders and so on in a project that's a truly homegrown project. So that's not part of the divestment. State insurance business will be sold with sufficient liquid and real assets to support the business, to meet the statutory reserves, etc.
Now, the trust fund that we also heard discussed in Parliament, is that the land, the parcel of lands that we spoke about, is that going to make a part of the trust fund?
This is yet to be determined because we have to sit down and work it out with the workers, their representatives, the government. But that's a possibility.
How difficult it is? Because first, it has evolved as far as change is concerned. But you're getting to a point where you want everybody to be pleased with what you've done. Have you heard this? What strikes me when I listen to the Honorable Gaston Brown in his presentation.
Yes.
He seems a very mature MP in his presentation.
At times, yeah.
And somewhere along the line, to me, in my mind, that he's quite satisfied.
Well, I don't know if he would agree that he's satisfied. But I have to say that I do respect the fact that, because when we invited the opposition, both the leader of the opposition and Mr. Brown, as the chairman of the party, to come and sit with us, before we had made, you know, all the decisions, because it's still a work in progress. We said, listen, come, let's share with you where we are, and you'll have the opportunity to give some feedback on it. And MP Brown did come. And he actually, I wasn't present, he met with the Prime Minister and Minister Lovell, who incidentally are the chairman and deputy chairman of my divestment board. And he indicated, having had the benefit of sitting with them and hearing them explain what we were doing, that he had a better understanding. Okay. He still has a philosophical difference.
Because that's the policy of the Antigua Labour Party.
Exactly.
Right.
So while we say we don't see that the government should be regulator and competitor, he said, I don't have any problem with that. He says, I don't have any problem with government selling insurance in St. Kitts or worldwide. So we say it is not the government of Antigua's role to insure a car in St. Kitts or in India or in China. That is not what government is about. Government is about taking care of the needs of its citizenry. Right? So there's a philosophical difference in opinion, and that's what party politics is about. If they were identical in their philosophies, how would you make a choice? So yes, MP Brown has shown a certain level of maturity. We have a philosophical difference of opinion. But at the end of the day, that's what democracy is about. There was an election, there's a party that won, and the party that won has a mandate. What I think distinguishes the United Progressive Party administration from many other governments is the highly consultative approach that has been adopted, because we have engaged persons, we have taken suggestions on board, and it has been an evolutionary process. What we have to be aware, though, that you must at some point draw a line and said, okay, we can't just keep changing. And we're coming very close to that point, because we're expecting to wrap up the transaction by the end of May. And so we can't be changing, because we have to sit down at some point with an investor and say, okay, here it is. Put your bid in now. After that, we can't keep changing. So we're getting very close to that line where, you know, this is it, guys. What we have now is what we're going forward with. So I want to take the opportunity through ABS to encourage all stakeholders, and in particular, employees and their representatives, customers, etc., to indicate if there are any other pressing issues, genuinely pressing issues that you would like us to take into consideration as we finalize the transaction structure. Because we heard that the issue of severance was so important, so key. We said, all right, fine, here it is. Then we hear something else is being brought up again. So, you know, if we want to be serious, if we want to be genuinely moving the country forward, whether you agree with the party's philosophy or not, the thing is, the party's in government, it has won an election, it has a mandate to proceed. You have the opportunity to help to have your views taken into consideration as we move forward. Let's have an open and frank discussion and then move forward.
And finally, as we look at the divestment of State Insurance Corporation, how soon are you getting, because I'm curious, folks are talking about bids. Are you getting any indication of folks who are willing to?
Oh, absolutely, because remember, we had outlined the process before. We went into it with about 16 firms being interested.
Oh, wow.
Then when they had to submit an official declaration of interest and show their bona fides, that they had the resources, they had the requisite approval and so on. That 16 narrowed down a bit. So we're down now to the serious contenders. In terms of having a bid in, not yet, because remember, we haven't finalized the structure.
Yes.
So once we finalize the structure, once we make the final determination about the severance, about the different things that we have to, and we put the documents down and say, okay, this is what you need to bid on. Because people tend to forget that we're not asking them to bid on the whole of State Insurance Corporation. Because I heard one of the MPs on the opposition bench say yesterday that we could get 50, 60 million. He's calling a number, but he doesn't even know what's for sale. And remember, we're taking out the real estate. We're going to take out some other things. But then we're not even selling all of what's left. We're selling a portion of what's left. So when people start calling numbers, we have to realize they're essentially calling numbers in the dark because they have not seen what exactly it is that's up for sale, and that we have to finalize within the next few weeks.
And this was one of the questions I posed to you, because there were also indication out of the parliamentary debate that the bidders are in secrets. And you're just saying now that you haven't accepted anything. Is
there
it
are no
from
bids
anyone?
yet.
Because,
the deadline for accepting bids has not yet been established because we need to finalize the documents and then give the investors about a month or so to look at them, and that will be the deadline for the bid. So as we sit here, no bids have been submitted.
how instrumental has the international agency been as far as assistance to the government in the diversification?
Essential, because as government, we do not engage the investors directly. Because, you know, it's interesting, because had we been negotiating directly, then they would say, oh, they're setting up their people. I have not had a conversation, the Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, we have not spoken directly to the investors. They speak to the IFC. And there will come a point when, you know, maybe just before bids, they may say, look, we want to eyeball the government so that we can really, you know, get a sense of what's going on. At that point, we may, you know, we will be required to sit with them. But at this point in time, the IFC is acting as the agent.
So the government has not sat down with any of the folks who may be interested in. But I'm glad you give us some clarity to that, because it figured that the divestment unit was keeping all this in secret.
No.
Okay.
Well, I mean, it is not being put out there, right? But I have not had any meeting, apart from when we first launched it. When we had changed the transaction structure, we said, let's do a road trip and see if this would work when we came up with the nationality requirement.
Yes.
So out of the 16 who had expressed interest, we picked, I think it was 5 or 6, and we went and sat with them. Some were local, some were regional, and said, if we did it this way, would you still be interested? But that's the extent of the face-to-face discussions that we've had with any potential investor.
Your Excellency, Joan Underwood, you have the final word. If there's anything else you'd like to sensitize the general public about state insurance and, of course, the divestment plans.
Absolutely. And once again, thanks to ABS for the opportunity to be here and to continue with our public education and public engagement as it relates to the state insurance. My first message goes to the board, management, and staff of the State Insurance Corporation. The decision to put severance on the table came this week in an extraordinary meeting of the board of directors of the divestment unit. We responded to communication received from the shop steward of the ATNLU at the State Insurance Corporation. The Prime Minister announced the decision the very next day in Parliament. Yesterday, I wrote to the staff of State Insurance Corporation advising them that the decision had been taken, as they probably would have heard in Parliament, and that the Prime Minister and the Minister, the Attorney General, would, as soon as we could work out some scheduling challenges, because we have some travel and some other commitments that we need to work around, we're going to go and sit with the staff and answer questions, share with them the decision, the rationale for the decision. We still need to sit with staff and their representatives to work out the details. And we are committed to doing that within the next several weeks. So thanks for the ongoing collaboration and communication, especially the Workers' Union, for the role that they have played. And we're committed to continuing to being open. And you know that I have multiple hats,
yes.
So I can't leave without just saying quickly, for energy, on March the 28th, we're going to be having our national energy consultation down at the Multipurpose Cultural Center. Come out, we're going to have some quizzes to see how much you know about energy efficiency, renewable energy, and some really interesting presentations. Then we want to hear from you. What is it that you want to see in Antigua and Barbuda's national energy policy?
And the date again for that is?
March 28th. It's a week from Monday coming, down at the Multipurpose Center, 6 p.m.
Okay. Excellency, always a pleasure to have you in our company. Do enjoy
here.
the rest of your weekend. And I know you must be feeling rather relief and proud of the processes so far.
Absolutely. It's been challenging, but it's a learning experience. And I think yesterday was a good day for us.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
In Antigua, Barbuda.